Bluegrass Jamalong is proud to be sponsored by Collins Guitars and Mandolins, each and every one built from the sound up in Austin, Texas. Hi, this is Matt, and you're listening to Bluegrass Jamalong, the podcast for anyone and everyone who loves bluegrass. My guest on Bluegrass Jamalong this week is Sierra Hull, and I've chatted to Sierra a couple of times over the past 2 years about where she's been at, the kind of the collaborations she's been working on, various bits and pieces, and throughout that she's been working on a record, and I'm delighted to say it is now out and we're going to talk about it. Sierra, it's great to have you here. Welcome back.
Thank you. Good to be back with you.
And
so soon.
Yes.
Yeah, I feel like we just got to chat, so back at it.
Well, what I love about this, this has already become my favourite Sierra Hull record in the 2 weeks I've been listening to it. And the bar is quite high for favourite Sierra Hull records. So it's,
Well, thank you.
But often you sort of work out further down the line how a record fits into somebody's timeline and an artist's arc and their journey. And yet this one feels so clearly like it's a progression from the last records and yet a new thing in its own right. It feels like such a kind of like growth in a way, if that makes sense to you. I mean, it just feels like such a natural next phase.
That's great to hear. I mean, it's really interesting. I think as the creator of something, it's really hard to sort of remove yourself from it and be able to look at it with fresh eyes, because I've not only lived the period in between, but also been with the music from the, earliest creation of it to the recorded format to finally being able to be like, here it is, So, certainly you kind of, for me, I'm just always trying to go, all right, what's something that feels inspired? What's something that feels, real and authentic to where I'm at in this moment? And, you try to give it your best effort all the way around from the writing to the performance to the, to the whole thing, the mixing, the production of the vinyl to whatever it is, till it kind of reaches this moment. It's sort of this, all these steps that it takes to kind of get there. So to me, to then like hear someone speak about it is always so interesting, and you hope people like it. But I'm delighted that you feel that way about it and that it feels like not just a natural progression, but maybe something new, a new offering. Cause I think you always, you don't want to, not that I'm here to like rewrite the story per se, but I do feel like I'm somebody that's always trying to search for something a little bit new, because for me, that's where I find inspiration, and I would hope that would be reflected in some way.
Well, and it's interesting because you sort of talk about, what feels right in the moment. And as an audience, we experience this record, it lands in our lap and we listen to it in sort of 35, 45 minutes. And that's a moment. But just reading through some of the stuff that came in advance of this interview, like I've sort of pieced it together, and there's 4 different sessions over the course of a couple of years. And so this record is not a moment. It's a journey through several moments and over time. And there's something, that's fascinating, just to work out which songs or which session and kind of think about that. Because when you listen to it, it sounds so much like an album that is cohesive, and it could have been recorded in 4 weeks and mixed, but it sounds like the same thing.
Yeah. Well, so even though a lot of this stuff the sessions were sort of separated by time and space a little bit in where we chose to record and things like that. I think it also kind of helped inform some of what followed it. So I think by having done it that way, in some ways, it might have even allowed me to make it feel more cohesive, because I was able to go, okay, what part of me is missing in this sector of the record? Like, I've got these songs. What else do I feel like I want to add to that? Rather than just kind of throwing whatever I had at the wall in the moment and trying to make it fit together. It's like I had time to sort of like work on pieces of it. And part of the reason for the time was not even necessarily that the songs didn't exist or that I didn't know some of them I was going to record. Some of it was just a matter of how busy I was. Once I really got back into touring, I really hit it hard for 2-3 years there, and kind of have continued to. So like being able to have a little bit of time and distance in between. I mean, I can't tell you, there were times where I would, revisit the stuff and sometimes be excited about it and sometimes feel like I can't listen to it right now. I can't listen to it right now because it just felt too stressful to think about what's next, So making a record is interesting like that, where you can really go through this ebb and flow of like, I'm so excited. I hate this. I'm so excited. I hate this, and really having to kind of just like check back in on like, what is reality here? Maybe it's not as bad or good as I think any of it is. You know what I mean? But this was a record I feel like I kind of held to myself more than I tend to. I didn't share this record a whole lot with people throughout the journey. Maybe if you were super close to me or around me a lot, you might, hear a little bit of what I was working on. Of course, someone like Justin heard every ounce of it, and is a part of it. But like, I don't even think my own mom heard the record at all till it was just done. Till it was done. And so, that was an interesting journey to just kind of feel like a lot of it, even as I made changes to things or was deciding what was, we recorded even more for this record than what made the record ultimately, by deciding to add another song or two here and there and kind of feeling like, okay, no, this is the thing and this is the batch of songs. And I also didn't want to make a record that was super long. I didn't want to, overwhelm with more than needed to be there. I just kind of wanted it to hopefully be like a nice flow of a listen that told the story of where I'm at right now and the things that I, am interested in sharing as an artist right now. And hopefully it just being a pleasant, I guess we all kind of want to make albums that we hope don't have a bunch of skip tracks on it. But to me, I just wanted to make sure it felt like each song could have its own legs, if that makes sense.
Yeah, and it's really interesting because the things I've talked to you about before, but the things I've heard you talk about before, it sounds like each album you've made has been a very different sort of journey. Weighted Mind, which ended up as a kind of duet record almost, but had a kind of a false start in some ways. And then 25 Trips, which you made with Shani Gandhi, who co-produced this record with you, but under very different circumstances and a very different kind of approach. And was having kind of the core of a band together at the start of this a big part of that, a kind of similar level of continuity there?
Yeah, for sure. Well, and it's funny because, it's like even with somebody like Shani at the end of having made the record before we're getting all the credits together. And I said, now, I have to give you a co-producer credit on this. And she was like, no, you don't. I don't think you should. And I said, no, you've been a huge part of this record. Like when I talk about having a teammate throughout the record, I mean, that was one of the joys of having her on board as the engineer and as my friend and, all the things throughout this record. There's a certain like honest, feedback person. You can be like, even a couple things after we recorded, we changed a few things, or maybe Come Out of My Blues being an example of something where like the arrangement, we carved some of the instruments out at the top to make it more sparse and different things like, you live with things long enough. And that's one nice thing about a studio recording is you can kind of somewhat change your mind a little bit here and there within reason, and, kind of go, well, you know what? I added harmony to this, but I don't think I like it. Like, I lived with it with having harmony because I thought it needed it, but like, let's just nix that and go back to just letting the song be the song. These choices that maybe if you're making everything in like a 2-week period, you sort of make your choices and, for better or for worse, you make them, but you have a chance to kind of live with them a little bit more as a listener. And so when I talk about somebody being in my corner, it's like, she's definitely in my corner through the whole process. And as I would have these ideas or these moments of being like, I don't know if this is any good. And she'll be like, no, this is good. No, just, it's good. Don't overthink that. Or, being able to have that kind of, trusted set of ears on on the music, and knowing that, she sonically cared about making this record sound the best that it could be. And I certainly care about all that so much too. And having these musicians also be so involved in, the whole sound of the record. It's such a different thing to go in and make a record with a group of people where it's like, I play a little bit of guitar, but Sean Richardson plays all the guitar on the record. It's like if there's Justin maybe plays, like he added some string pads on the song Spitfire, cause he's really good at that stuff. And, I just wanted to hear what it sounded like. So we just set that up and did that here. Actually, we did it in this room, I think, where I just recorded him in here. And, so there's little things that, you can add and do, but the core bones of the tracking sessions were basically my touring band, which at the time also involved Jeff Saunders on bass. So he's throughout this whole record. And then Eric Coveney coming in kind of at the end on a track. But yeah, it's just, having those group of musicians be part of it through the beginning arranging of the songs, to the studio to now. We just did our album release show here in Nashville on Friday to get to stand and we played the whole album in full and feeling like, wow, we can kind of do the record live. This is what it sounds like, and it's a rewarding thing to have that kind of investment from people you love and care about and to be able to, have that kind of, support in releasing this record too. That feels very different than as much as I've loved being able to have heroes and people I love come in and guest on the record or do various tracking sessions with different band lineups. This one felt like there's a core to it that, I've not had in previous records.
Do you think that in part has made it easier to kind of do the independent thing this time? Just feeling like it's a fixed thing for a while. You've got this band and you've got a thing you've been building over a few years. And did that make it easier in some ways to go out on your own?
We'll be right back with you just after this. The long-awaited Hill Country series from Collings Guitars represents a new voice in their acoustic lineup. Rooted deep in the bluegrass world, these new Dreadnought and OM models feature a strong fundamental tone with a dry, warm and woody character that's sure to catch the attention of players who hold the vintage instruments of the 30s in their highest regard. Watch world-class pickers Jake Workman, Kenny Smith and Bob Minner perform with new Hill Country instruments on the Collings Guitars YouTube channel and learn more at collingsguitars.com.
I guess I'm smart enough to know and have had my career long enough to know that a lot of things are chapters. I know it's rare that anything's forever, even a really good thing, So I just feel really grateful to be in this moment. I feel like with the release of this record, it just dawned on me, maybe even this past week, we just went out on the road and I kind of looked at the flow of the tour and how things were going and how strong every single person in their position is, whether it's our front of house engineer or our monitor engineer, just everybody who was out on tour with us. And I kind of looked around and I thought about my management team and my booking team and putting this record out. And I went, this feels like maybe the first time that I've really looked up and went, all the pieces feel exactly where they're supposed to be in this moment. Where, I've always had things where I'm like, man, I'm really proud of how this is going, but this thing over here, we gotta kind of pull this along and make this better. Or this thing, it's like, oh, this person or this, this particular little area, really needs some work, or I've got to focus all this energy over here. And it just kind of felt good for a second to look around and go, man, how lucky am I that I'm just surrounded by all these amazing people on both sides of the fence, both the band, the production, the team behind the record, and to be doing it independently for the first time, which is scary enough on its own, to be able to rest in that is actually, yes, gives me, such great joy and relief in knowing that I've got a really good group of people around me. So I couldn't be, I think grateful just is the only way I know how to describe it. There's a certain gratitude that I feel this time around that's more than I've experienced thus far.
Well, it's interesting because the kind of the feel of the record And like maybe themes of the record is too strong, maybe not. But just the whole thing feels really grounded and very kind of, ironically perhaps for a record called Tiptoe High Wire, it feels very sort of assured and grounded and kind of earthy almost. Like there's this kind of, it sounds like a record made by somebody who knows who they are.
Well, that's a great thing to hear. I appreciate that. Yeah, I think for this record, and I've had a lot of time to sort of digest the meaning of the title to me at this point, because when you need to name a record, you kind of, or at least I do, I go through 1,000 different things in my mind of like what really is the proper, thing to deem this record. And I didn't feel like there was a particular song. I felt like, I kept going back to this idea of A Tiptoe High Wire, because this does feel like such an interesting moment in my life and my career. I think, the song Spitfire that the title comes from is about my granny. I feel like a lot of my like rural Appalachian roots are kind of reflected in this record in a way. I didn't want to rewrite the script. I think where you come from musically, for me growing up in the bluegrass world, where I come from in life, the sounds of, I grew up loving simple, lyric forward, but sometimes 3-chord songs, that you don't have to be completely rewriting the script to just say something meaningful and powerful sometimes. And I wanted to make sure that I didn't lose sight of that in this record. I feel like I've done a lot of things musically where I'm trying to lean into other things and explore. And I still love that. And I still wanted some of that to be reflected on this record too. But it felt like this interesting balance of where I wanted my home and my family and all that stuff and who I am as a person and where I come from in one hand. And then in the other hand, the part of me that like kind of left my small little town and travels the world and gets to experience all these new things all the time and is always learning new things, both musically and personally, and being challenged and all those things that kind of inspire me as a musician too. And kind of trying to like step out into this new space with some boldness. And so with the song being Spitfire, that Tiptoe High Wire lyric comes from, and thinking about sort of the bold resilience that I think of, that song's written about my granny, but kind of all those kind of souls who teach us what strength looks like, just all those things kind of floating around in my head. It just felt like the right title, and the right thing. So I think sometimes the groundedness can come from having equal parts two things that are very different from one another, that kind of balance you out and put you in where you need to be in a moment, so in a long-winded way, that's sort of like, at least emotionally, what I feel like this record represents for me.
And it is really interesting because there's like balance to be found all over the place with stuff, and with this record, it's definitely got progressive elements to it, and there's certainly and some simple songs, but there's I think every kind of progressive music has to strike a balance between being progressive and being approachable at the same time, and that and for me this record has like both of those in huge chunks, and so it's really exciting because although you've got particularly the instrumentals that are intricate and complicated and like fast paced, and there are also songs that, despite some intricate arrangements, somebody could just cover them. Somebody could sit on YouTube and sing you them with a guitar. And with a lot of progressive music, that's the arrangement and the song are totally the same thing. And with this, it feels like they're songs and they're arranged in such a way, but they could also be arranged in 15 other ways if you chose to do that. And there's something really lovely about that kind of that dual layer that's there.
Thank you. Yeah, I actually think it's funny. I think it would be way more easier for me to make a record full of like crazy experimental, like stuff you haven't heard as much, throwing things at the wall kind of experimentation kind of songwriting. Like, I feel like I could pull that stuff out all day long because I'm interested in a lot of different things. And I think that there's no box. And I kind of like to live my musical world where there's no box in a way, but sometimes there is beauty in being able to give yourself a little bit of a box. And I think that like being able to you lean a little bit back more into my roots, which is a form of music, which, you know, part of the beauty of it is that there is this kind of box that it's presented in. You know, the song form is to be expected. You know, you have verse, chorus, you know, form songs where instruments kind of take on a particular role, and there's certain harmony structures and things like that. That's still music that, you know, at my heart and soul, I love. That's kind of where I come from. So I actually find it way harder in some ways to write a really simple, powerful song than to write something completely like you've not heard before, you know, like, because, anybody in a way can do something, you know, kind of off in left field, but to be able to kind of bring it back and try to really focus the simplicity of a message and write a song like what you're saying, where someone else could then take it and cover it and make it their own thing. You know, there's a real power in that too. And I wanted to make sure and kind of focus in on that as a songwriter a little bit more this time around as well.
It's funny. I remember first time I interviewed Chris Eldridge, and and I love Punch Brothers. They're just, you know, they're an extraordinary thing. And I remember him just saying, thing is with Punch Brothers, nobody really covers our songs because they can't.
Yeah.
It's like, there's maybe Rye Whiskey and I Blew It Off, and that's about it. Everything else is so, you know, you need to be able to play it. And it's so.
And there's beauty in that too. I mean, when I made Weighted Mind, that was one of the things that Béla said to me. And I think that my record, making that, was more of my offering of that kind of a thing, where he was like, you should, I would love to see you make a record that's so undeniably you that no one else could do it. And there's something else, there's something really special about leaning into that, you know, but then there's the other side of the token of being able to write something that then can connect in a way that it can belong to anyone. And that's its own kind of magic too. And both things are equally hard to do, but I think they can both be special. And so I kind of wanted to, you know, without thinking about it too much, I guess, but there is always that part of me that like thinks about the strength in both of those areas and wanting to try to tap into both worlds a little bit.
Well, that sort of speaks back to what you were saying earlier about kind of trying to do the thing that feels real in the moment. And because you could sit down and go, well, I want this record to be 75% progressive and 25% tuneful. And like, you know, and you come up with this thing that is utterly unreal. And so I guess you can't overthink things like that too much.
It just gets in the way. I mean, you know, the truth is at the end of the day, you kind of have to lean into, you know, the honesty and truth of where you're at in the moment if you really want to make any, like, all my favorite albums are made that way, you know, and it doesn't mean that every single thing that you're going to make always is going to resonate all the time, you know, but it's funny. It's like, I never know if it's going to or if it's not, you know, if I'm making something, it's because I feel strongly about it in a particular moment, you know, and at some point you just have to make the thing with the best pure intentions that you can as an artist. And then you kind of hand it over to the listeners, and then it becomes, you know, it's kind of not, it's not mine anymore in a way. Now I've kind of given it to everybody else. And so, you know, the way it's received now is just, there's kind of nothing you can do about it. You just have to do the thing you feel most connected to. And of course you hope people like it. I mean, you know, I think we've talked about this before, but if I just wanted to be home and make music, you know, in my little room here and just for fun, I could do that all day long and music would bring me joy. But like, I am essentially, yes, making music for me, but I make music because I love the experience of sharing music with other people, whether it's in the recorded format, in the live setting where we can have this musical experience together, the exchange of being able to share something, say something you really care about and have it be received by somebody. It's like, that's the magic of it all. So you hope people receive it, but you know, but we have no control over how it's going to be received. You just kind of have to make it with some bit of truth and honesty and do something you can be proud of and try not to worry about it after that.
Well, I think that's probably my relationship with most of my favorite artists is people just go, come over here, come and look at this. And because you trust them, you go, great. Okay. If that's where your interest is, I will follow you. And so many things that I love that, you know, particularly some things that are challenging to listen to at first, and you've got to put a bit of work in, you just do it because somebody who you trust musically goes, I'm going over here. climb on board, let's go. And you go, great, all right.
Totally. And I think that's the beauty of like artists who get to be around for a long time, you know, artists that I've followed since I was a kid who are still continuing to put out records, you know, we're all going to have our favorite things, right? Because I also think Justin and I were talking about this the other day where, you know, there's certain artists or albums that affect you at a certain period in your life. And it might not be the artist's favorite thing they ever did, but if it hit you at a certain moment where you needed it, or it just like, you know, shook your world in a certain way. I mean, it's hard to compete with those records that hit you at those moments. You know what I mean? And that has more to do with us as listeners than it does the artists that are really making them. You know, it's like, you know, and sometimes other albums will never live up to those particular albums that hit you at a particular time because they're just so impactful that you never get over how impactful they were. And it's not the artist's fault. You know what I mean? So it's like, I don't know, maybe let's just say you have your favorite Tony Rice album or whatever. You know what I mean? It's just, you can't let go of that almost. It's like, it's the thing that album is just the thing that you always return to. And you may like other things, you know, later in life or whatever, but there's this kind of one special one. And, you know, it's just how it goes as an artist. And I think though the beauty of when you gain that kind of trust and longevity though, when you have fans, you know, as I've been fans of other artists, I may still have my favorite thing somebody's done, but I'm always going to go with them. I'm always going to follow them because like you said, there is this trust and like you gave me that and that thing changed my life. So I'm always going to be interested in what you have to show me. Beyond that, even if this thing remains the thing that I, you know, can't get enough of, that's okay. I still don't expect somebody to do the same thing over and over and over. Why would they? They've already done this thing. You know what I mean? So like the moving on to other things or trying other things, it's like, that's what music is kind of all about, I think, and being able to find something new to share and show people like what you're talking about.
It's that strange sort of idea that really like, art is just the process of doing things and trying things and being curious. And actually, artworks are just byproducts of that. They're not, the art is not the final thing. The art is looking for the thing almost. And then you find the thing and you have it. But it's, you know, it's the journey is a particularly meaningful part of the process in the first place.
Absolutely.
And I remember when I first talked to you, I came and interviewed you at King's Place just before a gig a couple of years ago. And we were chatting about this, what turns out to now be this record. And you were saying that you'd sort of hoped to make a record that felt maybe a bit more optimistic and had its, like, particularly after the pandemic years, but just sort of a record that kind of had a, you know, a more hopeful feel to it. And it's definitely that. It's interesting just the themes compared to 25 Trips even, which is a record that has so many references to time and slowing down time. And this record has just got so many references to things like birdsong and sunlight and open windows. And yet, you know, there are tracks on here. Spitfire is not, you couldn't call Spitfire a happy song, but it's also a celebration of a person. And it's a hopeful, positive celebration of things that maybe are kind of dark things that have happened to somebody. And Muddy Water is like a hopeful song about, I'm not going to leave you standing alone. It's about having the, you know, the courage and the strength. And it's a really interesting record for that, because it has, without kind of ignoring the darkness and the struggle, there's also a kind of a lift of the shoulders about the whole thing that I just love. Thank you.
Yeah, I think that was important to me, to want to feel those emotions in this batch of songs. And I also think, you know, I'm now 33, you know, I'm in my early 30s. And I think that like just being in a different place in my life a little bit where, you know, I've lived long enough now to experience disappointments and some struggles and be able to kind of like, you know, you make it through. And, even, yeah, like the song Spitfire as a good example of like, there is a certain heaviness to the content of that song and talking about, you know, the things that my granny went through. But there's also kind of like, you know, when I think of her as a Spitfire, I think of it with this smile and this smirk, because you know, she had this strength, and life sometimes, you know, it gives you a grit, you know, when you live through things, you go through things. And I mean, my goodness, I've not been through half the things that she had to go through in her life, you know, or that many others have had to. But there is a certain thing of like, you know, growing older and life kind of toughening you up a little bit, emotionally and all those things, but not wanting to like lose that childlike joy and optimism toward life, and still, you know, thinking about the good things to come as well. You know, it's like the last thing I want to do is become a old jaded person who, you know, isn't interested in the good things life has to offer. And it's like, I don't know. It's easy to like, you know, you experience enough disappointment or different things. It's hard to kind of rise back from that sometimes. But I think like as I'm now in my 30s, a lot of those highs and lows feel a little bit more balanced to me, where I feel like I can kind of go, all right, well, that's really exciting that this thing here maybe is a real bucket list moment or something that I've really wanted to happen or dreamed about, and go, wow, that's really cool and that's exciting, but not like get so excited that it just like floats me off into this unrealistic place for too long. You know what I mean? Until, you know, somebody comes in and pops the balloon, as my friend described it. You know, my friend Charlie Worsham said, yeah, having a career is kind of like having a balloon that somebody just kind of keeps airing up. And then every now and then somebody comes through with a straight pin and just goes pop. And then you just deflate back down to reality. And then you have to get all patched back up and with your emotions and all that stuff. And then you slowly get aired back up until you can float again and sort of see the beauty again. And I thought that was such a beautiful way to kind of look at it, you know, but it also means that those lows don't hurt as bad either, because I come to expect that I'm going to have some, because I've lived through enough of them now where I go, okay, well, yeah, did I really want this thing to happen? Or am I bummed that this went that way or whatever? Like, yeah, okay, this sucks, but life's not over. Just, you know, keep on the path and keep to what is true and what, you know, you can believe in and trust. And so I don't know. I wanted that kind of groundedness to be reflected in this record too, because I feel like it's more where I'm at in my life now as an adult. And that's one of the kind of beautiful things about getting older, I think, is the being able to just kind of, I don't know, have a more balanced outlook and emotional space that you can kind of be in.
Well, it's funny that, because it totally speaks to what you were just talking about in terms of music hitting you at certain times in your life. And like, it's easy to miss the thrill of a record just totally taking over your entire being. And like you miss those sort of highs, and things will never hit me as hard, as quickly as they did when I was like 22 or whatever. But at the same time, like there is, like you say, there's a balance. Like the lows aren't as all encompassing most of the time anymore either. And it's that, that is the way it is. And so learning to sort of love that and live with it and kind of lean into it is a really enjoyable part of getting a bit older. But I guess the other thing is, for most artists, they don't do as much of their growing up in public as you've had to do. And so there must be an interesting tension in that as well, to some extent, in the world still probably likes to think of you as little Sierra Hull, when like actually.
Yeah. Well, yeah, it's funny. I think there's the, some of it's to be expected. I mean, you know, I'm also like a small, petite person in real life. So it's funny. It's like I'm around my heroes still, and I'm like, yeah, they're going to forever think of me as 12. That's just, I get it, you know, and as I grow older and I see like even someone who's like 19 or 20, I'm just kind of like, oh my God, they're so young. Like I get it, you know, being, as I start to age myself and kind of looking down, I'm like, oh my God, like, yeah, I was that young little kid out there, you know, doing it, but I'm okay with that. You know, I think, it's all part of it, and I wouldn't have it any other way. I mean, it's been one of the blessings of getting to be around through all these years of my career. Like, I don't feel like I've really had a period where I've just kind of completely gone away or haven't been connected with my heroes and friends in the especially the bluegrass community since I kind of started, you know. And there's a certain kind of foundation and reliance you can have on that kind of support throughout all the things that I'm doing now. If I hadn't had all that, I don't know how I would be navigating everything now, but I think it's like due in part to that of being present and being sort of welcomed in such a strong way to the community I love and care about so much that it's kind of allowed me to now even be at the age I'm at now and feel like I've had all the stuff I've learned for all these years, and continue to learn. But it definitely kind of gives me something to rest a little easier in as I get older.
Well, and there's something really interesting with all of that as well, in terms of kind of the pressure to put out a lot of music all the time now must be pretty high. And you've waited like this, and this is the longest gap between albums, but it's not really much longer than the gap between Daybreak and Weighted Mind. It's probably about the same. And you've been in the sort of public eye and touring and busy and collaborating and all of those things. And I think about other artists that from the outside appear to be as busy as you are, people like Chris Thiele or Béla Fleck, all these people who are just constantly doing things. And they're like releasing records with different ensembles every other week. There's another 3 Béla records out that I haven't got to listen to yet. And you take your time, and there's something really lovely about that. Do you feel a pressure to release things more quickly?
I always tell myself I'm not going to take this long. I'm always like, I'm not going to do that again. I'm not going to drag this out. I'm just going to, because there's too much emotional turmoil that comes with living with this stuff too long. Again, where you're like, oh, I'm excited. And then it's like, oh, I'm not at all excited. Like this, I don't know what I'm doing. There's a lot of time to sort of like question all of it. Should I start over? Is any of this any good? All that stuff when you take a long time. So, again, I'll just say it here, publicly. I hope the next record I make actually is something that I go in and maybe in a month or so I make a record and I'm done and I put it out. It would be nice to experience making a record that way because I have so rarely done that, if ever. None of my records have been that way. They've all been things that I've either thought long and hard about for a while and taken my time, either not necessarily just stretching the recording process out, but just all of it. You know what I mean? Even from the time when I signed with Rounder at 13, I didn't actually make my record till I was 15 and, it came out at 16. But it's like, I've just always kind of taken my time. And I think it's because I care so deeply too. And that's not to say other people who do things quickly don't care, but there is a certain amount of just, I don't know, really wanting whatever I'm offering up in the moment so I can say with confidence, this is something that I've really cared about that now I'm giving you, that I'm not trying to just be like, here's any old thing. It's like, all these records to me feel really, meaningful to me as an artist, not necessarily just something I could have done on any old Wednesday, and maybe that's exactly what I need to do next though. So, I mean, it's like I go back and forth of thinking like, the beauty of a live show is sometimes that it's something that happens in a moment and you can't change the magic of that moment. It's either there or it's not. And I think there's plenty of great records that are made that way too. So who knows, maybe the next thing I do will be something really quickly. But at this point, even if I do feel pressure, I've learned about myself. I've felt pressure for years now that I should probably be putting out more music more frequently, whether it's, cause we have to worry about the streaming algorithms and the, all the social media gods and all that stuff we got to kind of cater to. But I know myself at the end of the day, I can know it and think it, but if it's not something I'm really ready and proud to do, I'm not going to do it. So I know it has to be the right thing. And so maybe there's also some wisdom in that I can kind of tell myself like, just be okay with it. I mean, I was just texting with Allison Krauss about this the other day because we were talking about, they got their record coming out and it's like the first thing in a really long time. And we've both kind of been hoarding our records and talking about it a little bit, texting here and there. And it's like, oh, my record's finally going to mastering. Oh, we just mastered my record. It's just like all the kind of almost, parallel steps of finally getting this stuff done that we've been both kind of working on for a while. And I said, yeah, it drives me crazy. I really don't want to take this long every time, or I don't want to, always drag out the mixing process or drag out these things. And she said to me though, and I try to rest in this a little bit. She said, I don't think you should have to apologize for it though. She said, because maybe there's just a lot of things that you don't like, and that's okay. Like, it's okay that you don't like every single thing that you do. You know, like if anything, it's okay that like you can lean into something that's just really meaningful and that you care about wanting it to be a particular thing and not just kind of throwing everything that you could be making or could be doing at the wall. And that's okay. And maybe that's part of what makes it special. And so, you know, I go back and forth in my own mind of like, well, maybe it's fine. Maybe it's fine that I take a long time, because it means when I do make something, you can at least know I've given it the good old college try. You know, versus feeling like my creative output is high enough that I think I could be doing a lot more, but sometimes I just kind of get my own way, I guess, of sharing it. Well,
and it's fascinating because you were saying sort of at the beginning about not wanting to make this record too long and leaving things out and putting some new bits in. And I'm sure the temptation is there to just put all of it out after this amount of time. And like, particularly in the CD era, people would just put stuff on and fill these things up because it would show you how long it lasted when you put it in the CD player. And there are many, many beautiful short albums, and there are many, many long albums that would have been better as shorter albums. And like a record is as long as it needs to be. And so I think there's a lot of like truth in that, you know, that it takes the time it takes, and you know better than anybody else does what that is.
Yeah. And that's exactly what she said. She's like, it takes the time it takes. And it's as simple as that. And that's okay. And you have to be okay with, if this is the time it takes, it's the time it takes, you know? And sometimes life is busy, and, you know, we do the best we can. But at the end of the day, I guess I don't want to settle for something that I don't feel proud of. You know, because I feel like I have to rush it, or because I feel like life or my career demands me to be throwing paint at the wall all the time, you know? So that being said, I still hope that like I can get in the swing of, I've got a lot of ideas and things that I want to do. And I would love to see my recording output be more than what it is, because I love being in the studio. And every time I have finished something, there's always a certain amount of like, oh, I love doing this. I love doing this as much as I love touring and all that. So I hope that, you know, there is a certain amount of confidence with every new thing you finish. You know, if you don't wait too long, you kind of can hopefully ride that wave into the next thing, you know, with what you've learned.
And presumably having a band kind of that has worked on this stuff and recorded this stuff and is now touring this stuff, it gives you a bit of a structure to maybe try some new things as you go and work a bit of it in, because you've got this ongoing project. It's not like that was that project, now what, you know?
For sure. Absolutely.
Well, thank you for coming back and talking to me about it. It is a fantastic record. I think people will have had it for about a week now. It's been out, but it's been a joyous listen. I think there's something really glorious about getting a new record from somebody that you love, and there's always a bit of anticipation, particularly after a long time, but just to go, this feels exactly like it's entirely new, but also feels exactly right, and just like settled as a listen very quickly. And there was something quite surprising about that, but also something very beautiful.
Thank you. Well, that means a lot, truly. I appreciate you listening so wholeheartedly. And yeah, it just feels good to finally be able to get it out there and share it. You know, I've already realized in this past week of like being out on tour, you know, we kind of did a bit of touring leading into the release week. And, you know, being able to go play songs, even the singles we released, it feels different to be able to play the song and people know the songs, you know? So I think, it'll be really fun to now get to be out there and play this music live now that people have had a chance to actually kind of live with it a bit, you know?
Yeah. Well, best of luck with it all. And with this album making its way out into the world. And as always, it is great to chat to you.
Hey, so great to chat with you too. I'll be tuning into all the future episodes coming up. Always great to be on with you. Thanks so much.
Thanks, Sierra.
Bluegrass Jamalong is proud to be sponsored by Collins Guitars and Mandolins, each and every one built from the sound up in Austin, Texas.